Namaskar. Welcome to this session on Bhagavad Gita in daily life. Today we shall be looking at how to deal with desires and all types of desires, including lust and greed. It is said that desires is the starting point of all achievement. In our worldly life, it is said that only if we desire, we can achieve something. And that's why desire is always portrayed as something which is worthy, which is worthwhile, which should be endeavored. But our scriptures, and especially Bhagavad Gita, also talks about, Shri Krishna says that the key to happiness is in reduction of the desires. So how we can deal with our desires, that determines whether we'll be happy in the end or not. And all of us want to be happy. And that's why we must understand how we can deal with desires, how we can control excessive desires and greed and lust so that we can become happy. Now, what about worldly desires? We all have worldly desires. We want to achieve something. We want to achieve, some name, some fame, some standing, some wealth, some position, some powers, reputation, all this. And it has been our experience that we keep on desiring different objects, new objects like phones and computers and things like that. Anybody who has a two-wheeler wants to get a better one, wants to go for a four-wheeler. And this is how we keep having our desire of having a bigger house, better life, better comforts. And all these desires keep coming to us one after the other. And sometimes even without much thinking on that, we try to fulfill these desires. And the moment these desires get fulfilled, there is another desire that springs up. So they keep coming. But our scriptures tell us that the root cause of these desires is our own unawareness, our own ignorance of our own self, our Atma Swarupa, which is the root cause of all these desires. Now, how these desires work? The moment the desires happen, it springs us into action. So we try to do something to achieve or fulfill that desire. With that, we get some kind of a result which we enjoy, we enjoy those results. And then this creates some kind of an impressions, which are called sanskaras inside our subtle mind, inside our sukshma sharira antakarana. These sanskaras, they are created, and these sanskaras then again create some more ichhas, and then again karma, bhoga, sanskara, ichha, karma, bhoga, sanskara, ichha. This cycle keeps going on and on and on. And these desires keep us bound in this world. They keep us in this world. That is what our scriptures tell us. They are our major obstacles because they don't allow us to transcend from this world for the final goal. And how to transcend these desires is a big question. It's a very difficult problem faced by most of us. A very difficult problem. And it's only with, scriptures tell us that only with understanding, viveka, vichara, with the correct understanding, with the correct attitude, with the correct knowledge and implementation, assimilation of that knowledge, implementing it in our life, it is the only way that we can transcend these desires. And that's why the priorities are very, very important in our life. We must know them well. We must have a good goal setting. We should know what we want to achieve. And then accordingly, we have to prioritize our life and decide accordingly what kind of desires we want to fulfill, what kind of desires we don't want to fulfill. And these priorities become very important. So in the second adhyaya, Bhagwan talks about, in the last part, he talks about the Sthita Prajna, the attributes of the wise person who is firmly rooted in wisdom. And in this, the first, Shri Bhagwan Uvacha, Shri Krishna says, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan, means that when all the desires as they appear in the mind, they are given up, and the person is happy in his own or her own self, Atma Swarupa, knows that our own self is the real happiness. The desired real happiness does not lie outside in fulfillment of sense pleasures. Then that person is firmly rooted in wisdom. That person is called a Sthita Prajna. But this is a very lofty goal. It's a very high goal to give up all desires. Our scriptures tell us that there are three main types of desires that we all have, which we need to give up. The first one is the desire for excessive wealth, more and more money, more and more, which is called vittechana. The second is called lokeshana, desire for name, fame, repute. We want to be known, we want to be well known, and that's why we do a lot of things to be known by others. And third is desire for having a child, a progeny, a generation, the next generation, family, putrechana. So all these three types of are the main desires, but there are several other desires which will probably come in one of these three desires. Now in the second adhyaya itself, Shri Krishna tells us that how even after we try our best to relieve our desires or to try to overcome our desires, but the final relief from seeking is only by attaining the supreme divinity. And that is the shloka, very famous shloka called Vishaya Vinivartante, for the inhaler, indweller, the Dehinaha. The objects are renounced because he's been trying his best to renounce the objects, doesn't want to, pursue this material world. But then the longing, the attachment, the rasa still remains inside. And this rasa can only be relieved by knowing Param Drashtva Nivartante. It can only be by knowing the supreme divinity we can get relieved from this rasa. And that's why this is where the role of our devotion, our attachment to the Lord, our surrender to the divinity helps us. Explaining how these ichhas or desires work, Shri Krishna tells us how these senses are so powerful, this indriya, how they are so powerful. He says, Yatato yapi kaunteya. Even for the person who makes efforts, who is a sadhak, who is a jignasu, who is a seeker, who wants to get a pure mind, who is trying his best to let go of all his vices and develop daivi guna, sampati, who does a lot of viveka, vichara, samajhdari, understanding. Even for this person, indriyani pramathini, his indriya, the sense organs, the five sense organs that we have, pancha, gnanendriya, through which we imbibe all the knowledge of the outside world, the eyes, the ears, the skin, the touch sense, and all these senses, they get all this information, we get it from outside, the smell and the taste. So these are very, very powerful, and they haranti prasabham manaha. They even kidnap the mind by force. If even we want to do something, but that sense organ, when it gets that sense pleasure, it will even, take away the mind, and it will not be under the control of the intellect. And these senses are so powerful. So this control of the sense organs, which is called Indriya Sanyam, is a very, very important part of Bhagavad Gita. Shri Krishna tells about these in the second adhyaya, the third adhyaya, the sixth adhyaya. In so many other adhyayas, Shri Krishna talks about Indriya Sanyam. Finally, in the 18th adhyaya, he talks about Indriya and Mana Sanyama. And he says, Tani Sarvani Sanyama, control all your sense organs. We have 5 Gnanendriyas and 5 Karmendriyas. The Karmendriyas are the hands, the feet, the speech, all these through which we do our actions. And this we need to control, become yukta, become balanced, become samatva, become equipoised, in balance, be neutral. Asita, have a firm resolution to do all this, to go into the path of dharma. Matparaha, surrender to that divinity, understanding with intellect. Vashehi Asyendriyani, whose senses are restrained, that person is, only his knowledge becomes firm, he becomes deeply rooted in wisdom, he becomes a sthita prajna. And then finally describes the inner state of the wise person who is in sthita prajna, who is a gnani, like giving an example of the ocean. Just as the water enters a brimful of ocean, all the rivers enter, but still it remains unchanged. Similarly, this sthita prajna, in spite of all the desires entering him, does not create any ripples in the mind of this person who is firmly rooted in wisdom. For this does not have much raga, dvesha, no attachments, and that's why that person has sashantim apnoti. He has a real bliss, real peace of mind. That person has na kama kami, though not the one who has many desires. That person never becomes completely eternally peaceful, because desires always spring us towards more and more actions, does not allow us to sit quietly and understand our real Atma Swarupa, which is the real bliss or the eternal bliss, the Ananda Swarupa. In the third adhyaya, the Karma Yoga, Bhagavan describes a lot of Karma Yoga attitudes, and finally Arjuna talks about Swadharma, duty, and then Arjuna asks a question to Shri Krishna, Athakena Prayuktoyam. How is it that we are forced to do some sinful activities even if we want to follow our own Swadharma? And Bhagavan answers, he says, what is it that impels us, a person who does want to continue to do his duty well, but against his own wish, anichannapi, palati vaniyojit. By force we are drawn into doing something that we don't want to do. And there are several things that we decide that we will not do today, but then the next day we will decide that, okay, I will not be eating sweets or fried foods from tomorrow, it's not good for me. But next time when it comes in front of me, I get, I just fall for it, and then I'm unable to control it. So this is how we are forced to drawn into doing something that is not good for us, but is not the right thing for us to do. So what is it? And Arjuna asked this very pointed question. It's a very good question, because most of us have this problem in our life. We want to change. We want to have a better lifestyle, better healthy life. We want to change our mind, our nature, our vices. We want to let go of our addictions. But we know also the way to change, but we are unable to change because some force is there which tries to push us at that time. And Arjuna asks, what is that force? And Shri Bhagavan answers, Shri Krishna says that it is this desire and the anger are the two root causes of all the sins. He says, Kama Esha, Krodha Esha, Rajo Guna Samudbhavaha. These desires and anger which arise out of the Raja Guna, because we have three gunas through which we operate. All our nature, all our actions are determined by our the mix and match of these three gunas. And Mahashana, it is like a glutton, never ending. It keeps on coming. Even if you satisfy, you fulfill one, it will keep coming again and again. Like a glutton, it never ends. And Mahapapma, it creates great sins. These desires and this greed, this lust, all these create such great problems for us in our life. We cannot understand it. Temporary happiness tries. This gives us a lot of pain in our life, destroys families, destroys the human being, creates anger, violence, and so many problems in our day-to-day life. That's why Bhagavan says, Vidhyena hiya vairinam. Know that these two, the desires and anger, are your real enemies sitting inside you. There are no enemies outside us. Those real enemies are sitting inside us. So kama, or desires, when we use the word kama, it does not just mean physical attraction or lust, but it means all types of desires, attractions, attachments, everything. All this is kama. And this arises out of our ichcha, thoughts, sankalpa. And this sankalpa is like what is called, as our Shastra says, it is Shobhana Dhyas. It is an illusion that this is good for me. We see an advertisement on the TV and we feel that, oh, this is good for me. This new phone or this new car is good for me. I must go and get it. And this gives us a sukha buddhi, that this will give me happiness and I need it. That's why it becomes a very intense desire. And then finally, if we do a root cause analysis, our Shastras tell us that it is because of our incompleteness, unfulfillment inside, which is the root cause of this springing of desires. And this is because we are not aware of our real, our eternal bliss, Atma Swarupa. And that's why this ajnan, this ignorance causes all these desires, which causes unfulfillment, incompleteness. And that starts with a thought that becomes intense desire. And then I want it badly. I can't stay without it. And this is when it starts creating the problems. So without thinking, we get attached to it, we get dependent on it, and then it starts, it starts determining our life rather than we determining our life. These ichchas or these desires start determining our life. So where does this desire stay? Because we know this, we know their home. Where do we need to strike? Because we need to know where these enemies reside. Only then we can do a surgical strike. So we need this intelligent system to know where these desires stay. And Shri Krishna tells us where they stay. Says that these desires, they operate through this Indriya, Mana and Buddhi. All these three, the sense organs, the mind and the intellect. These are the three things through which these desires operate. And through these desires, they delude the person and they cause concealment of our real self-knowledge. Our divinity is concealed by these constant desires. And that's why what we need to do is to discipline ourselves, Indriya, Mana and Buddhi, because the Buddhi is the most powerful, it's the intellect, it's the highest seat of intelligence, because if that is used well, then we can keep the mind and the Indriya under control. But if Buddhi is not strong, we don't have the right understanding, the right attitudes, then Indriya will create such power that it will kidnap the mind, and then ultimately the Buddhi also becomes, unbalanced. So what we need to do in our life is to scrutinize all the desires that come to us. If they are necessary, yes, accept it. It's a reality. We need this. For example, desire for more. If I'm hungry, I need food. Some good desires. I want to do good for the society or for the family, for myself. Yes, if they are necessary, accept them, reality, and then try to attain them. But if they are non-essential, then we should try and leave them. We should not try and suppress them. Leaving them essentially means transcending these desires with the right understanding. And daily, if we do this, there will be some progress. We must have patience because all these changes in our mind happen very, very slowly. It's a very gradual process. And the benefit, it will be known by ourselves. We will instantly know that the mind becomes quiet, becomes very still, very peaceful as we progress on this path. And this learning that we do should be put into our practice. Whatever we learn from our scriptures, the idea is to put it in our life. And that's why during our lifetime, we should learn the scriptures, not at the fag end of the life where we have already lived the life and retired, and then we will think that I'll look at the scriptures now. But these scriptures are actually meant for us to put it into our practice during our life. And that's why all depends on me, how serious I am, how sincere I am, what is the kind of my dedication towards doing this kind of a scrutinization, some self-introspection, some thinking, some self-introspection, some contemplation is necessary in our life before we actually jump to actions to fulfill the desires. That's why Shri Krishna tells us Indriya Sanyama is the first step of the spiritual journey. Shama, Dama, Uparati, Shraddha, Samadhana, Titiksha. All these Sham Adi Shat Sampatti is called as Adhikaritva. It's eligibility for the divinity, the knowledge. And these are all the steps that we need to take to understand the divine knowledge that Krishna is giving us, unfolding in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's why we need to start first with the control of our senses, because this pushes us to commit the sins. And this destroys all our wisdom, Gnana and Vijnana. Gnana is the knowledge of the divinity, the self-knowledge. Vijnana is the knowledge of all these realities of the world, the worldly knowledge. So all this gets destroyed by this kind of incessant desires. That's why we need to control our indriyas, our senses. And that's why we need to leave them, these desires, prajahi yenam, Shri Krishna tells us. So this kind of social distancing that we practice today in the post-COVID era, when we really need to achieve or do this constantly, is with my raga dvesha. We need to observe our very strong likes, dislikes which arise out of these desires. Dharma, adharma, what needs to be done, what is the right thing to do, what is not the right thing to do, what I should leave, what is karma, what is needed to be done, where I should devote my time to action, and what is akarma, what is not worth doing, what is not worth spending time on, and what is the ultimate reality of this existence, what is the truth, what is that reality, and what is that something which is not the truth, what is all transient, what is permanent. This kind of a discrimination, viveka, I must constantly keep doing. And that's why Shri Krishna tells us in the third adhyaya that it's only by the knowledge that we can perish the desires. The desires, the only treatment for this symptom or this disease is the knowledge, right knowledge. By knowing our Atma Swarupa, our Atma, our consciousness, which is beyond all this, and by controlling our mind and intellect, our own Atma Sanyama, with our consciousness, we can conquer this enemy and let go of this enemy, which gives us a lot of pain and miseries. And that's the only way we can do this, by Gnana. There is no other way that we can finally put an end to all these desires. And in the 16th Adhyaya, again, Shri Krishna says that these are the three doors to hell. Trividham Narakasya Dwaram, this Atmana Nashanam, they destroy the very purpose of our life. These are Kama, Krodha, and Lobha. So these are the three main the vices or dangers which are doors to hell. Therefore, Tasmat Etat Trayam Tyajet, you should leave all these three, tells Arjuna. And this is only possible in our human life, this kind of thinking, intellect, intelligence that humans have been bestowed. It is only with this awareness, understanding, and application in our life we can get rid of these desires. And again, in the 5th Adhyaya, Bhagavan has said that sense gratification is deprecated because it causes pain. And he says here that these pleasures which are obtained by contact of our senses with the objects, sansparshaja bhoga, dukkha yonava evate. These are the cause for pain, miseries, because they always keep us overindulging in them. And that's why temporarily we may find that it gives us happiness, but this is an illusion. In the long term, it generally causes us more pain. We are not used to thinking like that. We don't think in the long run what is happening, but this generally, and it is adhyantavantaha. Hey Kaunteya, oh Arjuna, they are all temporary, they are all transient, they all come and go. for these transient things. You don't fall into this trap. You nateshu ramate buddha. The wise do not indulge in them. It is only for the unwise person who can indulge in this kind of sense pleasures. And that's what, more the sense pleasures, more the miseries. This we need to understand. These are the words of none other than Lord Shri Krishna. And finally, in the 5th adhyaya, again, he says that it's only people who are the one who controls their desires and angers, they are truly happy. Sasukhi naraha, that person is truly happy. Shaknoti heva yah sodum, who is capable of controlling this life before the body comes to an end. All this force of the desires, kama, krodha, bhavam, vegam, that vega, that force with which these desires and this anger comes, if we are able to control, then only we can be truly happy. And that person is a real yogi, according to Lord Krishna. So coming to the end of this session of dealing with desires, lust and greed, we must understand that our priorities in our life are very, very important. What we decide, what kind of desires come to us, what is the, it's a right desire, whether it needs to be fulfilled or not. This kind of understanding, this kind of a priority setting in our life, goal setting is essential. And Bhagavan says that only person, yada, all the desires are given up, that only person becomes happy. But some kind of an attachment, longing, rasa remains, and that is only relieved by knowing the supreme param drashtva nivartate. And how these desires work, they all work through the indriya. Indriyas, they go out and get all this knowledge from the world, and this is through indriya where they are so powerful that they haranti prasabham mana, they also kidnap the mind along with it, and that's why we are unable to control ourselves. And that's why Bhagavan tells us, Tani sarvani sayyam, control all your sense organs and do self-restraint over your own self. Very clearly, 3rd adhyaya tells us that these desires and this anger, kama esha, krodha esha, they are vidya enam, iha vairinam, they are your real enemies. Bhagavan tells us that we need to control these through our sense organs, indriya sanyama, manas sanyama, and this is where Bhagavad Gita gives us the beautiful sermon, Krishna, how we can control our mind, how we can control our senses, how yada samharate chayam, he gives an example of a tortoise, how it, whenever he sees any attack, how he withdraws all his limbs, and that hard shell protects the tortoise. Similarly, we can withdraw ourselves from all these sense pleasures, and ultimately it's only the person who controls these desires and this anger is a truly happy person. Sasukhi naraha, he is a real person who is really happy, and we all want to be happy in life. And that's why we need to understand, Geeta ji, the words of Lord Krishna, how these desires, incessant desires, how this is going to make us unhappy, painful, miserable in the long run. Thank you very much. With this, I come to the end of this session. We pay our gratitude to our Lord, through whose grace, Ishvara Krupa, all this is possible. I pay my tributes to this Guru Shishya Parampara, through which this knowledge is transferred so as to reach us. I pay my respects to my Guruji, Pujya Guruma, with whose grace I am able to learn the scriptures and I am able to share this understanding with you. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parah Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.